Put the war back on. Gary Wetzel looks down at what's left of his left arm. It's hanging by threads of muscle and skin, nearly severed. Blood is pumping out with every heartbeat, pooling in the rice paddy around his feet. The explosion threw him 15 feet, 2 enemy rockets detonating inches from his position. His right arm is shredded, shrapnel through his chest, his left leg. The pain is beyond anything he imagined possible. Around him, the landing zone is chaos. His helicopter is down, burning. The crew is wounded, scattered, and the North Vietnamese are closing in. Their automatic weapons emplacement is tearing the American troops apart, pinning them down, killing them. Wetzel sees his machine gun, still mounted in the gunwell, 20 feet away, the only weapon that can reach that enemy position. Every law of human physiology says he should be going into shock, losing consciousness, dying. His body has lost too much blood, sustained too much trauma. No one could function with these injuries. Gary Wetzel is 20 years old, a door gunner from Wisconsin, a kid who volunteered for combat when he could have stayed safe, delivering ammunition. He looks at his nearly severed arm one more time, then he staggers back to his machine gun. This is the story of the soldier who lost his arm, stuffed it in his fatigues, and kept fighting until the enemy was dead and his brothers were safe, and how every morning for the rest of his life, he puts the war back on. Gary George Wetzel was born on September 29, 1947, in South Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the second of 9 children, a middle-class family. His father was a World War II veteran who worked in a factory. His mother worked part-time as a nurse. Gary grew up in a typical post-war American childhood. Boy Scouts, baseball, football, playing in the neighborhood until the streetlights came on. He idolized John Wayne, not just because Wayne represented America, but because he represented respect, honor, duty. Wetzel attended local schools, was an average student, not exceptional in any particular way, just a regular kid growing up in Middle America during the 1950s and 60s. In 1965, at 18 years old, Wetzel graduated high school. He faced the question every young man faced in that era. What now? College wasn't calling him. The factory jobs his father worked didn't appeal. He could drift, find something eventually, hope for the best, or he could serve. Wetzel walked into a recruiting office. On June 7, 1965, he enlisted in the United States Army. The decision was simple. Either get a job or join the service. He chose service. The Army sent him to basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, then to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, heavy equipment operations. The Army needed people who could operate bulldozers, cranes, construction equipment. Wetzel learned the trade. They made him an instructor, teaching other soldiers how to operate heavy equipment. Safe work, important work, far from combat. But Wetzel didn't join the Army to stay safe. He joined to serve, and in 1966, serving meant Vietnam. He requested deployment. Once, twice, multiple times. His superiors denied him. They needed instructors. Wetzel was good at his job. He was staying at Fort Leonard Wood. Finally, in October 1966, they approved his request. Wetzel deployed to Vietnam, assigned to an ordnance unit, delivering ammunition to bases across South Vietnam. Important work, necessary work, still not what Wetzel wanted. He wanted to be where the action was, where he could make a difference. After completing his first tour, Wetzel did something that shocked everyone who knew him. He volunteered for a second tour as a door gunner with the 173rd Assault Helicopter Company, 11th Combat Aviation Battalion, 1st Aviation Brigade, flying helicopters into hot landing zones under enemy fire, the most dangerous job in Vietnam after infantry point man, a job with a casualty rate that made strong men reconsider their life choices. Gary Wetzel volunteered for it twice. By January 8, 1968, Private First Class Gary Wetzel had everything he wanted. He was a door gunner, flying combat missions, making a real difference, doing the job he'd joined to do. On that morning, he climbed into his Huey and prepared for another insertion mission. Troops going in, standard operation. He'd done it dozens of times. This time would be different. January 8th, 1968, near Ap Dong An, Republic of Vietnam. The insertion force consisted of multiple helicopters. Wetzel's bird was part of the package, carrying troops into a landing zone that intelligence said was cold, no enemy activity, safe insertion. Intelligence was wrong. The moment the helicopters descended, enemy fire erupted from multiple positions, heavy, coordinated, devastating. This wasn't random Viet Cong harassment. This was a prepared ambush by well-trained North Vietnamese army troops. Wetzel's helicopter took hits immediately, multiple rounds through the fuselage, through the tail boom, through the engine. The pilot fought to control the aircraft, losing hydraulics, losing power, going down. The helicopter crashed in the landing zone. Hard landing, not a controlled crash, the kind that breaks bones and knocks men unconscious. Wetzel survived the impact. So did the rest of the crew. The pilot, the crew chief, all wounded, all stunned, but alive. Then the real fight began. They were trapped in the landing zone, pinned down by intense enemy fire, an automatic weapons emplacement, heavy machine gun, maybe a 12.7mm, Chinese-made, devastating firepower. The gun was positioned perfectly, covering the entire landing zone. Any movement drew fire. American troops were scattered, taking casualties, unable to maneuver, unable to assault the position. Someone had to eliminate that gun, or everyone was going to die. Wetzel saw the pilot, his aircraft commander, wounded, trying to move, exposed. Wetzel started moving toward him, to help, to drag him to cover, to do something. Then the world exploded. Two enemy rockets hit simultaneously. B-40 rockets, Soviet-made, fired from close range by North Vietnamese troops who saw an opportunity to kill Americans. The explosion detonated inches from Wetzel's position. The blast wave picked him up, threw him 15 feet, slammed him into a rice paddy. Shrapnel tore through his body, his right arm, his chest, his left leg, and his left arm. The left arm took the worst of it, nearly severed, hanging by threads, muscle, skin, nothing more. Wetzel lay in the rice paddy, bleeding. The pain was beyond description, beyond comprehension. His vision blurred. His hearing was nothing but ringing. His body was going into shock. He could have stayed down, should have stayed down. Any rational person would have stayed down, called for a medic, waited to die or be rescued, let someone else fight. But the machine gun was still firing, still killing American soldiers, still pinning down his brothers. And Wetzel's M60 machine gun was still mounted in the helicopter, still functional, the only weapon that could reach the enemy position. Wetzel staggered to his feet, his left arm hung useless, blood pouring from the nearly severed limb. His right arm was wounded but still worked, barely. His left leg buckled with every step. He stumbled back to his helicopter, back to his gunwell, back to his machine gun. He grabbed the M60 with his good hand, braced it against his body, aimed at the enemy position, started firing. The pain was intolerable. Every movement sent fresh agony through his body. Every breath was torture. The blood loss was catastrophic. He should have been unconscious, should have been dead. Wetzel kept firing, through the shock, through the pain, through the blood loss, through injuries that would have killed most men. He kept the M60 hammering, pouring fire into the enemy position, suppressing the automatic weapons emplacement that was killing American troops. His machine gun was the only effective fire on the enemy at that moment, the only thing keeping them from overrunning the landing zone, the only thing between the scattered American troops and total annihilation. Wetzel understood this. He kept firing, adjusting his aim, walking rounds into the enemy position, watching the tracers arc across the landing zone, seeing the impacts, knowing he was hitting them. His left arm swung loosely, getting in the way, a hindrance. So Wetzel took his nearly severed left arm and tucked it into his fatigue jacket, just shoved it in there, out of the way, problem solved. Then he went back to firing. Minutes passed, felt like hours. The enemy automatic weapons position slackened, then went silent. Wetzel had eliminated it. killed the gunners, destroyed the weapon, done the impossible. The American troops could move now, could maneuver, could fight back, all because one 20-year-old door gunner refused to accept that his wounds were too severe to keep fighting. Then Wetzel saw his aircraft commander, still down, still wounded, still exposed. Wetzel tried to move toward him, to help, to drag him to safety. He took 3 steps and collapsed, unconscious. Blood loss, shock, trauma. His body had reached its absolute limit. He woke up seconds or minutes later. Couldn't tell. Time had no meaning. Everything was pain and confusion. But he remembered. The aircraft commander still needed help. Wetzel started crawling, his right arm barely functional, his left leg dragging, his left arm still tucked in his fatigue jacket. He pulled himself forward, inch by inch, across the rice paddy, toward his aircraft commander. The crew chief saw him coming, was already trying to drag the aircraft commander to safety, to a nearby dike. Some cover, some protection. Wetzel reached them, started helping, using his good arm, pulling, pushing, moving the wounded pilot, refusing to quit, refusing to stop. Then he lost consciousness again. Second time. His body simply shut down. Too much trauma, too much blood loss, too much damage. But before he passed out, he got the aircraft commander to safety, behind the dike, out of direct fire, with the crew chief who could protect him. Wetzel collapsed next to them, unconscious, bleeding out, dying. The medevac finally arrived. Combat medics rushed to the wounded. Triage. Who could be saved? Who was too far gone? Who needed immediate evacuation? They reached Wetzel, looked at his wounds, looked at each other, started working frantically. Tourniquet on the left arm, pressure bandages on the other wounds, fluids, morphine, everything they had. They loaded him on the medevac helicopter, flew him to a field hospital, then to a larger hospital, then to Japan, then to the United States. The left arm couldn't be saved. Too much damage, too much time, too much blood loss. The surgeons amputated what remained. Wetzel woke up in a hospital stateside, missing his left arm, scarred across his chest and right arm, permanent damage to his left leg. 20 years old, his combat career over, his body permanently changed. The army promoted him to Specialist 4, submitted the paperwork for the Medal of Honor. Someone had witnessed what he'd done, how he'd fought with a nearly severed arm, how he'd eliminated the enemy position, how he'd saved his aircraft commander, how he'd refused to quit until the job was done. On November 19, 1968, President Lyndon B. Johnson presented the Medal of Honor to 5 Vietnam veterans in a White House ceremony. Sammy L. Davis, Dwight H. Johnson, James Allen Taylor, Angelo Littike, and Gary George Wetzel, the youngest, the newest, the door gunner from Wisconsin who'd lost his arm but saved his crew. The citation read, although bleeding profusely due to the loss of his left arm and severe wounds in his right arm, chest, and left leg, Specialist 4 Wetzel staggered back to his original position in his gunwale and took the enemy forces under fire. President Johnson shook Wetzel's remaining hand, placed the medal around his neck, told him the nation was proud, grateful, would never forget. Wetzel stood at attention, accepted the honor, knew it wasn't just for him. It was for every door gunner, every helicopter crew, every soldier who'd fought in that landing zone, every American who'd served, but especially for the aircraft commander whose life he'd saved, for the crew chief who'd helped, for the troops who'd been pinned down until Wetzel eliminated that machine gun. That's who the medal represented. All of them, not just one 20-year-old kid from Wisconsin. Gary Wetzel returned to South Milwaukee, came home to his family, to his mother who'd watched her son go to war twice, who'd received the telegram that he was wounded, who'd prayed he'd survive. He was alive. He'd survived, but the war came home with him. Every night Wetzel takes off his prosthetic arm. The war comes off. For a few hours he can sleep, can rest, can try to forget. Every morning he puts the prosthetic back on. The war goes back on. A physical reminder, a constant presence, every single day for the rest of his life. I never ever have a day where I don't think about the war, Wetzel said decades later. When I go to bed at night, I take the war off, and when I get up the next day, I put the war back on. That's the cost, not the arm itself, but the daily reminder, the permanent connection to January 8th, 1968, to the landing zone at Apdong An, to the moment he tucked his nearly severed arm into his fatigue jacket and kept firing. Wetzel got a job as a heavy equipment operator, the skills he'd learned at Fort Leonard Wood before Vietnam, before he volunteered for combat. The training that could have kept him safe came full circle, gave him a career, a future. He married, raised a family, lived in South Milwaukee, went to work every day, operated cranes, bulldozers, heavy machinery, did his job, provided for his family. He attended Medal of Honor ceremonies, reunions, veterans events, met other recipients, shared stories, built friendships with men who understood, who'd been there, who knew. He spoke at schools, told his story, showed kids his prosthetic, answered their questions, made sure they understood. War is real. Consequences are permanent. Freedom isn't free. In 2014, Milwaukee County honored Wetzel. They renamed a section of Mason Street near the War Memorial Center Gary G. Wetzel Medal of Honor Way, a permanent marker, a reminder of what one of their own had done. Wetzel attended the ceremony with his 91-year-old mother, stood next to the sign, accepted the honor, said the words he'd said for decades. I should have been dead. It wasn't my time. Maybe it was time to be alive today for this very special tribute. I'm very honored we look at this sign, Gary G. Wetzel Medal of Honor Way, but it's really our way, not his way, ours, all of us, every veteran, every soldier, every American who served. That's how Wetzel saw the medal, saw the honor, saw the recognition. It wasn't personal glory. It was collective acknowledgement of service, of sacrifice, of the price paid by an entire generation. The medal itself, Wetzel explained many times, wasn't his alone. Even though I've had the privilege to put that blue ribbon around my neck, I not only wear it for me, I wear it for everybody else, and consider myself more or less a caretaker, not an owner, not a hero elevated above others, but a custodian, a guardian, someone entrusted with preserving and honoring what the medal represents. In 2015, Wetzel met a little girl named Bella Zizzo. She was 4 years old, born with a limb difference, missing part of her arm, facing a lifetime of challenges, questions, difficulties that able-bodied people never consider. Wetzel heard her story, reached out to her family, asked how he could help. He assembled a team of his motorcycle buddies, organized a charity ride, raised money, paid for Bella to attend No Limits Camp, a camp for children with limb differences, a place where she could meet others like her, where she could learn she wasn't alone, wasn't limited, wasn't broken. The charity ride also funded a family trip to Disney World, a chance for Bella and her family to make memories, to have experiences, to live without limitations. Bella's mother was overwhelmed. To have somebody reach out because they're touched by your 4-year-old, it's incredible. It just goes to show you that there are good people out there. It's huge to have him look at our family and say we want to do anything we can. Wetzel didn't do it for recognition, didn't do it for publicity. He did it because he understood what it meant to lose an arm, to face every day with a physical difference, to put the war back on every morning. If his experience could help a little girl face her future with confidence, then January 8th, 1968 meant something beyond combat, beyond medals, beyond personal survival. It meant purpose, connection, service that extended decades past the battlefield. Gary Wetzel is 77 years old now, still living in South Milwaukee, still working when his body allows, still putting the war back on every morning. He participates in Memorial Day rides in Washington, D.C., honors fallen veterans, rides with other Medal of Honor recipients, with veterans from every conflict, with people who understand. He speaks at veterans' events, shares his story, tells young soldiers what combat really means, what sacrifice really costs, what service really requires. He mentors young people facing challenges, physical disabilities, life difficulties, moments when quitting seems easier than continuing. He shows them his prosthetic, tells them his story, shows them that limitations are often mental before they're physical. The Medal of Honor brought celebrity, recognition, respect, but it didn't bring wealth, didn't bring ease, didn't erase the injuries or the memories or the daily reminder. Wetzel doesn't complain, never has. He made his choices, volunteered for combat twice, went to that landing zone, fought when wounded, did his duty, came home different. That's the deal. That's the cost. That's what service means. You give what's required. You do your job. You take care of your brothers. And you live with the consequences. Every morning, every day, for the rest of your life. The story of Gary Wetzel is not about heroism as Hollywood portrays it. It's about ordinary people doing extraordinary things because the situation demands it. Wetzel wasn't special before January 8th, 1968. He was a regular kid from Wisconsin, average student, average athlete, just another American teenager who joined the army and volunteered for combat. What made him extraordinary was what he did when the rockets hit, when his arm was nearly severed, when the pain was intolerable, and the blood loss was catastrophic, and every survival instinct screamed to stay down. He stood up, staggered back to his machine gun, started firing, eliminated the enemy position, saved American lives, then tried to save his aircraft commander, passed out twice from blood loss, kept going anyway. That's not superhuman, that's human, the best parts of human, the determination, the refusal to quit, the commitment to brothers, the understanding that some things matter more than personal survival. The machine gun had to be silenced. The aircraft commander had to be saved. American troops had to be protected. These things mattered more than Wetzel's pain, more than his injuries, more than his life. So he did what needed doing, tucked his nearly severed arm into his fatigue jacket, kept fighting, kept moving, kept serving until his body physically could not continue. That's why the Medal of Honor exists, not for people who do impossible things because they're superhuman, but for people who do impossible things because they refuse to let their brothers down, even when it costs everything. Every morning, Gary Wetzel wakes up in South Milwaukee. He looks at his prosthetic arm, the physical reminder of January 8th, 1968, of the landing zone at Apdong-an, of the moment everything changed. He puts the prosthetic on, puts the war back on, starts another day. He doesn't do this with bitterness, doesn't do it with regret. He made his choices, volunteered for combat, did his duty, came home alive when many didn't. The arm is the price, the daily reminder is the cost, but Wetzel paid it willingly, would pay it again, because the aircraft commander lived. The American troops made it out. The mission succeeded. That's what matters. Not the arm, not the pain, not the permanent disability, but the lives saved. The mission completed, the duty fulfilled. I should have been dead, Wetzel has said many times, but he wasn't. He survived. He came home. He built a life. And every morning he puts the war back on, not as a burden, not as a tragedy, but as a reminder of who he was, what he did, what he and his brothers sacrificed. That's Gary George Wetzel, Specialist 4, 173rd Assault Helicopter Company, door gunner, Medal of Honor recipient, the kid from Wisconsin who volunteered for combat, who lost his arm but saved his crew, who refused to quit when quitting made sense, who lived to tell the story, to inspire others, to show that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Every morning, every day, putting the war back on, that's service, that's sacrifice. That's the standard Gary Wetzel has lived for 56 years since that January morning in Vietnam. The machine gun eliminated, the aircraft commander saved, the mission accomplished, the arm gone, the war permanent. That's the deal. Gary Wetzel accepted it, lived it, honors it still, every morning, putting the war back on.